You told yourself this time would be different, that silence was strength, that walking away without a word would give you the power you never had when you stayed. So you stayed quiet, you stayed distant, you stayed disciplined. But the truth is, you didn't move on. You just stopped talking. And now the loudest thing in your life is the echo of everything you never said. Because silence doesn't mean peace when the war is still inside you. This video isn't about getting her back. It's not about decoding mixed signals or waiting for the right message. It's about you, the man left standing when the noise fades. The man who followed the rules, cut contact, stayed silent, and still feels the ache that won't leave. Because silence without meaning isn't peace. It's avoidance dressed as discipline, and healing doesn't come from silence alone. It comes from confronting what that silence is hiding. You're not here to prove anything to her. You're here to reclaim something for yourself. Comment: I don't chase what walked away. Number 1. Silence is not healing. You stopped speaking to her, but have you started speaking to yourself? There's a moment after the dust of heartbreak settles, when everything goes still. You don't call, you don't text, you don't check her page anymore, not as often at least. You're not chasing, you're not begging, you're not exploding into emotional outbursts at 2 a.m. You've chosen silence, and on the outside it looks like strength, like power, like dignity, like you're finally doing what every self-help post tells you. Go no contact. Walk away. Be the man who says nothing. But here's the quiet truth no one warns you about. Silence without healing isn't strength. It's just another way to bleed without making a sound. You think because you're not reaching out, you're over her. You think because you've mastered the art of pretending she doesn't exist, you're free. But freedom isn't measured by how long you can go without texting. It's measured by whether she still lives in your head when the room goes dark. Ask yourself, if you're not speaking to her, but still having the conversations, in your mind, have you really let go, or have you just taken the chaos from outside and locked it in? This is what men do. We internalize, we bottle, we disappear into stoicism that isn't stoic, it's scared. We confuse emotional silence with emotional resolution. But suppression isn't strength, it's storage. And what you store, you carry. It comes out in your sleepless nights, in your triggers, in your inability to feel joy, even when she's long gone. It spills into your next relationship, into your trust, into your self-worth, because silence doesn't empty you. It fills you. With everything you're too afraid to feel, the psychology is simple, but painful. When you grow up in a world where men are taught to be quiet, you mistake silence for resilience. But resilience doesn't mean holding your breath longer than everyone else. It means learning how to breathe again after everything has been knocked out of you. This silence you've chosen, is it because you're reclaiming your peace? Or because you're still hoping she'll notice the absence and come running back? Be honest, because if your silence is a strategy to win her attention, it's not silence. It's manipulation dressed in restraint, and it's costing you. Here's the Stoic truth. Silence, when rooted in self-respect, is power, but silence rooted in fear, of pain, of truth, of being seen as vulnerable. That's not strength, that's avoidance. And there's no healing in avoidance, only delay. You're not weak for wanting her back, you're not broken for aching. But if your only way of dealing is to disappear, to cut off, to numb out, then you haven't healed. You've just gone missing. Start speaking again, not to her, to yourself, to the parts of you still carrying the weight, to the boy inside you who never learned how to grieve something without burying it. Let your silence transform, not into a wall, but into a mirror. Let it reflect the man you're becoming, not the pain you're avoiding, because healing doesn't happen when you say nothing. It happens the moment you stop pretending you're fine. And from that stillness comes power, not to get her back, but to get yourself back. You don't have to break the silence to be free. You just have to make sure it's not breaking you. Number 2, you miss the idea, not the woman. It's not her you can't let go of. It's the version of you she made you feel like you were. Be honest, late at night, when the silence gets loud, when the noise in your head turns into a highlight reel of memories, the way she looked at you, the way her hand fit in yours, the laughter, the chaos, the spark. You tell yourself you miss her. But what if that's not the truth? What if the ache in your chest has less to do with her and more to do with you? More specifically, who you felt like when you were with her. You see, heartbreak has a way of creating illusions. It wraps pain in nostalgia and calls it love. It turns dysfunction into passion. It turns toxicity into intensity. And it convinces you that losing her means losing everything. But pause. Strip her name away. Remove her face. Forget the details. What do you really miss? Do you miss being seen, being wanted? Do you miss the feeling of having someone who made you feel chosen, even if only temporarily? Because here's the quiet, cutting truth. You don't miss her. You miss who you were when she made you feel like you mattered. That version of you, confident, needed, desired. You saw yourself through her eyes, and you liked the reflection. And now, without her, you feel invisible, forgettable, like a man without shape. This is what men often grieve. Not the person, but the identity we built around that person. We tie our self-worth to the moments we felt loved. We mourn the mirror she held up, to us more than the woman herself. But understand this, if your peace depended on her presence, then it was never peace. It was dependency. And dependency disguised as love is a prison you build with your own hands. Psychologically, this is common. The mind clings to emotional highs, to validation hits, to the rush of being wanted, even if the source was unstable. It confuses emotional intensity with emotional depth, and when that source vanishes, the crash feels like death. But it isn't death, it's withdrawal, and withdrawal is not proof of love. It's proof of attachment. Now here's the Stoic shift, the redirection of your pain into clarity. Love, real love, does not disempower you. It does not make you question your worth when it's gone. It does not leave you shattered, begging the past for answers. If the love you experienced left you empty, then it was not love. It was your ego, drinking from a well that was never meant to nourish you. And your ego is clever. It will replay every sweet moment. It will filter out the chaos, the fear, the insecurity. It will try to convince you that she was the one. Not because she was, but because it hurts to admit she wasn't. Because if she wasn't, then you have to face the truth about why you stayed. And that truth can be brutal. You stayed for validation. You stayed because it felt better to be wanted in dysfunction than to feel alone in self-respect. You stayed because it was familiar. Because she made you forget how alone you felt with yourself. But now you are alone, and that's not a punishment. That's an invitation to rebuild the man you kept trying to find in her eyes. to become the reflection you once needed her to show you, to be whole without a witness, to be valuable without applause. You don't need her. You never did. You needed the version of yourself you thought only she could bring out. But that man, that version of you, he's still here. He's just waiting for you to stop looking for him in her memory. Here's your truth bomb. This isn't love. It's ego wrapped in regret. And when you let the ego grieve without interference, you create space for real love. The kind that begins with you. Number 3, no contact without inner work is just a timeout. You went silent, but did you go inward? You cut her off, blocked the number, muted the notifications, buried the photos. You deleted the thread that once held your world together, thinking that if you erased the evidence, you could erase the ache. And for a while, it feels like power. It feels like control. It feels like a man reclaiming his space, his peace, his pride. But here's the truth. You don't say out loud. You're not over her. You're just out of reach. And that's not the same as healing, because silence without self-reflection is nothing but noise you're afraid to face. You didn't go silent to find peace. You went silent to avoid pain, and avoidance wears the mask of progress. Ask yourself, quietly, honestly, what did you do in the days after you cut her off? Did you sit with your grief? Did you ask yourself why you tolerated the disrespect, the confusion, the emotional chaos for so long? Or did you distract yourself with work, with gym, with scrolling, with other women? Did you simply replace the sound of her voice with something else to fill the silence? Because that's what men are taught, isn't it? To act like nothing happened, to grind harder, to level up, to win the breakup, as if heartbreak is a scoreboard. But let me tell you something most won't. Growth isn't about pretending you're okay. It's about confronting the version of you that wasn't, and that version doesn't die in silence. He waits. He lingers in the shadows of your mind, hoping you'll finally stop running. You see, no contact is powerful, but only when it's rooted in clarity, when it's an act of self-respect, not a tactic to prove your worth. Because if you're going silent to make her miss you, that's not healing, that's performance. And deep down, you know it. You're still watching, still wondering if she's thinking about you, still measuring your progress by whether she reaches out. And that's where it all falls apart. The psychology is simple and brutal. Avoidance delays healing. It doesn't erase the wound. It just puts a timer on the pain. It keeps the door open just enough so that if she ever knocks again, you're ready to forget everything she put you through, because the silence wasn't for you, it was for her. To teach her a lesson, to make her feel your absence. But here's the twist. If your absence needs to be proven, then your presence was never fully valued. Stoicism doesn't mean closing your mouth and numbing your heart. It means owning the stillness. It means choosing the silence not as a sword, but as a sanctuary. It means looking inward and asking the hard questions. Why did I stay? What did I ignore? What was I hoping to fix through her love that I was never taught to fix on my own? Because until you answer those questions, no contact is just a timeout, a break, a breather before the next collapse. You'll either go back to her or find someone just like her and call it a fresh start. But it's not. It's the same pattern with a different name. Here's your truth bomb. Disappearing is not growth. It's a pause button on pain, and eventually you'll have to press play again. So press it now. Sit with yourself. Break the silence, not by calling her, but by speaking to the man inside you who deserves more. He's waiting, not for her return, but for your own. Growth doesn't happen in hiding. It happens in the open wounds you finally dare to touch. Number 4, the mind clings to the familiar even when it hurts. You miss her not because she was good to you, but because the pain came dressed as home. Be honest. You still think about her, not every second, but enough to feel her ghost, brushing against your peace when the world goes quiet. She wasn't gentle. She wasn't consistent. She didn't choose you, not in the way you needed to be chosen. And yet, you miss her, you crave her, you wake up hoping this ache will disappear, and yet terrified that it might, because if it fades, really fades, then maybe it was never love at all. That thought hurts more than the breakup, because it forces you to ask a question you're not ready to answer. What if you only stayed because the pain felt familiar? Here's the quiet truth that most men don't admit. You didn't stay because it was good. You stayed because it was known. You stayed because chaos feels like home when calm is foreign. You stayed because you learned, somewhere along the way, that love is something you fight for, even when it doesn't fight for you. We are drawn to what repeats, what we've seen before, what mirrors the patterns etched into us when we were boys. If love, for you, looked like walking on eggshells, if it sounded like silence when you needed warmth, if it meant proving yourself over and over, then of course you stayed when she made you earn her love. Of course you stayed when she left you confused, but craving, because your nervous system wasn't looking for peace. It was looking for something that felt familiar. Psychologically, it makes perfect sense. The brain doesn't register healthy as safe. It registers familiar as safe, even when familiar breaks you down, even when familiar keeps you small, even when familiar makes you question your worth day after day. And so you confuse in pain with passion, tension with connection, anxiety with desire. You didn't love her. You loved what your body thought was home. And that's the most dangerous kind of attachment. The kind that convinces you to keep returning to the fire even after it's burned you to ash. But here's where everything shifts. Here's the Stoic blade you need to hold in your hands. Comfort is not the same as truth. And just because something is familiar does not mean it is right for you. Growth requires discomfort, because healing will always feel like loss at first. It means walking away not just from her, but from the version of yourself who kept calling pain love just because it had your name on it. You don't need to demonize her. You don't need to rewrite the past into something clean or cruel. You just need to accept that craving her is not proof she belonged in your life. It's just proof that your system got used to a feeling you no longer deserve, missing her. It doesn't mean she was the one. It just means the wound is still healing, and wounds itch before they close. So let yourself miss her. But don't chase what broke you. Let yourself remember. But don't confuse memory with meaning. Let yourself ache, but don't return to the place where you learned to bleed in silence. You're not broken for wanting her back. You're just detoxing from a kind of comfort that wasn't real. And here's the quiet truth bomb. Missing her is not proof she was right for you. It's just your nervous system clinging to a pattern it finally needs to release. Let go. Not because she didn't matter, but because you do. Number 5, closure is an inside job. You're waiting for her to make sense of what she shattered, but some truths aren't meant to be spoken. They're meant to be faced. You keep replaying the last conversation over and over, looking for the sentence you missed, the tone in her voice, the moment when everything shifted from forever to I can't do this anymore. You lie in bed staring at the ceiling, whispering words into the dark that will never be heard. Things you should have said, things she should have said. The apology you still think you deserve. The explanation that might finally make the pieces fit. But here's the hard truth. She's not coming back to explain. She's not going to sit down across from you and give you the moment of closure your heart is begging for, not because she's cruel, but because she's moved on. And sometimes closure isn't something you get. It's something you give yourself. You keep thinking, if I just understood why. But why is a trap. It's the mind's way of buying time, of staying connected to a person who's no longer here. You don't want closure. You want clarity. You want control over a narrative that slipped through your fingers like sand. But control is the opposite of healing. It's the ego's last stand, the desperate attempt to anchor yourself in a storm that's already passed. It says, if I can make sense of this, maybe it won't hurt so much. But meaning doesn't soften grief. It only delays the moment you accept that some things end without explanation. And this is where men get stuck. Waiting for a message, a call, for her to say, I'm sorry I hurt you, for her to admit that she messed up, for her to give you back the dignity you felt was taken. But that moment, it rarely comes, and when it does, it doesn't feel like relief. It feels empty, because no words, no matter how sincere, can undo the silence she left you in. Psychologically, this is about attachment, the unfinished loop. Your brain is wired to complete stories, to close the book neatly, but heartbreak doesn't come with an ending that makes sense. It just stops, and your heart is left holding all the open pages. So you chase closure the way a drowning man chases air, hoping that if she just gives you the right sentence, the right reason, you can let go. But here's the Stoic shift. You don't need her to give. You peace, you are peace. You just haven't claimed it yet, because closure isn't a conversation, it's a decision. It's you standing in front of the mirror and saying, I'm done needing you to make me feel whole. You're not broken because she left. You're not unlovable because she couldn't see your depth. You're not less of a man because she walked away without looking back. You're simply in a moment of becoming the kind of man who doesn't chase answers to wounds he can learn to live through. Becoming the kind of man who can sit with silence and let it teach him instead of torment him. Becoming the kind of man who closes his own chapters without resentment, without revenge, and without needing anyone else to understand why. Because closure isn't found in her words. It's found in your breath, in your stillness, in your choice to stop circling the same memory hoping it transforms. It won't. What transforms is you. So here's the truth bomb, carved in quiet strength. Closure isn't given, it's chosen. And you're allowed to choose it right now. Not when she's ready, not when it feels perfect, but when you finally realize that peace was never waiting on her. It was waiting on you. Number 6, strength is not numbness. You stopped feeling so it wouldn't hurt, but now nothing moves you at all. There's a silence in your chest that you've started calling peace, a flatness in your day that you've confused for healing. You don't cry anymore, you don't get angry, you don't even think about her as much, but you don't laugh either. You don't feel joy in your victories, you don't feel connected in conversations, you don't feel anything, and yet you tell yourself this is strength, that this numbness, this gray haze you now live in, is what healing looks like, that being untouched by the pain means you've risen above it. But let me ask you something. Is silence the same as stillness? Is emptiness the same as peace? Or did you simply shut it all down so you wouldn't have to face the part of you that still hurts? Because men, especially men like you, learn early that feelings are dangerous, that they make you weak, that they get used against you, that tears are shameful, that vulnerability is a threat, so you become a master of emotional escape. You disconnect, you dissociate, you replace emotion with logic, pain with productivity, heartbreak with habit. You bury the grief beneath workouts, projects, silence. You grind your way through your days so you don't have to pause and ask, what's actually happening inside me? You mistake control for clarity, but control without connection is just emotional exile. And exile might protect you from the fire, but it also keeps you from the warmth. You're not healed. You're just hidden. You haven't risen above the pain. You've simply become immune to it, and in doing so, immune to everything else. Psychologically, this is called emotional numbing. It's the nervous system's way of protecting you from overwhelm. When your heart can't handle the weight, your mind shuts the door, but what gets locked out isn't just the pain. It's the joy, the hope, the ability to connect. So no, brother, this isn't peace. It's survival, and survival isn't the goal. Living is. Here's the Stoic correction. Strength is not the absence of feeling. It's the discipline to feel without being consumed, to sit in the fire and not become it, to feel deeply, fully, and still move with purpose. The strongest men are not the ones who feel nothing. They're the ones who feel everything and choose what to do with it. They don't run from emotion, they master it. They understand that sadness has wisdom, that anger reveals boundaries, that grief shows you what mattered. And when you numb those emotions, you numb the lessons. And two, you stay stuck, cold, detached. So what would happen if you stopped trying to stay numb? If you let yourself break for a moment so you could finally rebuild for real? What would happen if you said, I am allowed to feel? I am not less of a man for hurting. I am more of one for facing it, because real power is not found in walls. It's found in standing open even when it aches. It's in choosing to feel, to stay conscious, to stay present, even when it would be easier to drift away. So here's the quiet blade of truth. Feeling. Nothing doesn't mean you've moved on. It just means you pause the pain. And real healing doesn't happen in pause. It happens in presence. Real men feel, they just don't let it lead them. Number 7, you are not who she left. She left a version of you that no longer exists, and maybe that was the point all along. Let me ask you something. Who are you now? Not the man she broke, not the man she walked away from, not the man lying on the floor wondering what went wrong. No, I mean you, the man who survived that moment, the man who's still breathing, still standing, still becoming, because here's a truth you've probably never said out loud. You think you were rejected. You think you were left behind. But maybe, just maybe, you were released. Not because you were unworthy, but because you were unfinished, because the man you are today wasn't ready to show up back then, and she wasn't built to meet the man you're becoming. It's a quiet shift, but it changes everything. You are not who she left, and the ache you feel. It's not just heartbreak, it's transformation, pain carving its initials into your evolution, loss chiseling away what no longer served you. This is what trauma does. It strips away the illusions. It tears down the scaffolding. It burns what was false to reveal what is real. Psychologically, that kind of rupture redefines identity. You thought you were complete when you were with her, but you were just comfortable. And comfort is not the same as clarity. She may have held your hand, but she couldn't hold your depth. She may have loved your potential, but she didn't have the strength to walk with your becoming. And now you carry the ashes of that version of you, the one who tolerated too much, the one who softened his truth to keep her around, the one who mistook survival for love. But ashes are not the end, they're the beginning, because what she left was not your best. It was just your before. You lost her, but you found something deeper. You found the anger, the fire, the refusal to stay small for anyone ever again. You found the silence that speaks truth, the solitude that restores dignity, the self-respect that doesn't beg for second chances. And slowly, without even realizing it, you stopped hoping she'd come back. You stopped needing to be seen because you finally saw yourself. That's the Stoic shift. You no longer define yourself by who walked away. You define yourself by who showed up in the aftermath. The man who didn't run from the ruin, the man who stayed, the man who rebuilt. She didn't reject you. She rejected a moment, a version, a shell. But that shell cracked, and from it you rose, wiser, sharper, cleaner, not because she left, but because you didn't stay behind with her. So don't chase the past. Don't beg the old story to make sense. Don't grieve a man who no longer fits your name. You are not who she left, and that's the entire point. You didn't lose you. You lost the man who needed her, and that, brother, is how you won. You've made it this far, not because the pain disappeared, but because you chose to face it, to sit with it, to let it reshape you instead of ruin you. You stopped chasing her. Stop chasing the apology. Stop chasing the version of yourself who believed love meant losing pieces of your peace. And now you see it clearly. That silence you used to weaponize, it's become sacred, not to make her notice, but to hear yourself again. You're not the man who needs to be chosen. You're the man who chooses. You are not the man waiting for closure. You're the man who closed the door, and you carry that stillness like armor, not cold, not bitter, just grounded, detached from chaos, anchored in clarity. You didn't just survive her absence, you discovered your presence. And there's no woman, no memory, no what if that can take that away from you now. So when the noise creeps in again, when doubt whispers in the quiet, come back to this truth. You are not who she left. You are who you became after. Comment, I am not who I used to be. Subscribe if you're walking away in silence, not to prove a point, but to protect your peace.